Welcome to one more at right angle webinars. As you are aware, at right angles is a mathematics dedicated to school level mathematics. Uh, it's a magazine dedicated to school level mathematics, and it comes out 3 times a year in March, July, and November. So this is Swati, and maybe some of you are already familiar with me. And today we are going to talk about geoboards, both the physical and the virtual versions that are there, and dot sheets, and how they can help us. Okay, so let's get started. So, many mathematics manipulatives are less popular in the mainstream, not as widely used as we would like them to be. However, that is not the case with Geoboard. Okay, so I have with me one kind of geoboard that you can see. It's out of plastic and very, very safe. Okay, nothing here, is can hurt children, so to speak. Okay, and then now let me show you. Excuse me. So these are some of the geoboards that are available in the in online. Okay, and the link is given in the article where I have reviewed the geoboard. See, you can make it a square one with fewer dots, or a bigger one with more dots, or you can make it circular. Okay, so these are the choices, and you can have rubber bands in different colors. So we will keep using this uh, uh, quite a bit in this today's seminar. Now, in particular, the geoboards uh, that are there, this one, okay, not the circular one, but see, the difference was there. In the virtual one you had one circle, here there are two concentric circles, so there are more things you can possibly do. Okay, we will try to illustrate some of these, some of what are possible, but there are definitely more ways to use them. Okay, so we will show you the use more at let's say class 6 7 level, but some of the things we will talk about will kind of build up towards what they will students will learn in higher levels, let's say at the secondary level, class 9 10 and so on and so forth. It will help towards building certain sense, developing certain spatial understanding, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, along with that, I would also like to show you some dot sheets. Okay. So let me share my screen to show you the dot sheets. Okay. So let me go full screen, and I hope this is visible. Um, yeah. So these are dot sheets, and as you can see, there are two types of dot sheets. Um, there is a dot sheet, the one that you can see on the right side. Okay. Okay, this dot sheet actually matches very much uh, with the geoboard, the where you have the pegs in the grid. Okay, and it's a very good idea that you make something on this and then draw it out in this one. Okay, and I think you can see a difference between this and the other one. Here you see the dots are aligned. I mean, if you look at it, it will seem like they're squares or rectangles, right? But if you look here, you will think of more like, you're seeing triangles and maybe hexagons and things like that. So this one is called the isometric dot sheet, because if you take any point and if you look at all its neighbors, they are all equidistant, at the same distance from it, right? So that's why same distance, so isometric dot sheets. Okay, and they're very useful if you want to make isometric sketch of three-dimensional objects. um, we have had a series of worksheets based on dot sheets. They come in at right angles, they come under tear outs. So you can take a look at them, lot of activities. So whatever you do on the geoboard, on this side in particular, you can do on this kind of a dot sheet. um, these dots are better than the grid sheet, because there is no confusion of which lines were already there and which lines have been drawn and so on and so forth. Okay, and if you work on this dot sheet, then your sense for uh, Cartesian plane increases. Okay, so that is something that is quite helpful. So one of my favorite thing is, and I will switch screen to show that. I will be switching screen quite a bit. So yeah, so one of my favorite activity is, like, if you have, if this is one side, I mean, as you can see, this one is pretty much the same as the dot sheets. There isn't too much of a difference, except, like, you can do these kind of things, which is very much like stretching a rubber band and stuff like that. Something that you it will be you will have to actually draw on the dot sheet. Okay, so, like, if this is given, can you complete the square? Okay, so somehow I have seen lot of students and lot of adults struggle with it. Okay, if it was this line, for example, this one, or this one, then there isn't so much of a struggle. Okay, probably because of the symmetry. But if it is this one, then people usually struggle quite a bit. So these are certain things that may appear very obvious to us, but these are some things that we would like to be obvious to many people. Okay, so these are some of the things that one should be able to do. Okay, and uh, while doing it, the kind of senses that you develop, like, I mean, where should this go to give you a right angle? uh, that I think is quite helpful. Okay, so these are certain things that I think should definitely be done either with Geoboard or with dot sheet. Okay, so if I mean, there are children who like drawing, there are children who don't like to draw, they want something more physical, etc. So dot sheet is something that, so you can transition from one to the other. Okay, um, and the thing is that, as with any kind of TLM, any kind of material, unless children are actively engaging with it themselves, uh, you don't get a lot of advantage out of it. So if this stays only in the hand of the teacher, then it is not so good. Or if the teacher chooses who will try, get to do stuff on this and who not, then it's not as much fun. So ideally, something like this should be there with each student, at least with, let's say, each pair of student or something like that, right? So I'm not sure how cost effective that would be. And that way, dot sheets can provide a cheaper alternative. Okay, because you just have to photocopy, and they are easily downloadable, and you just have to photocopy a bunch of paper, and that's about it, right? So, and if you can if you have the resources to use the virtual ones, then that will be helpful also. Okay, I mean, you can enjoy the color and so on so forth, all of that. Okay, so what are the kind of things that can be done? One thing which I had mentioned in the article, one of the great things about the physical geoboard, and I mean, the virtual geoboard has a lot of advantages, right? Um, if the access is there. But as far as the physical geoboard is concerned, um, one advantage it has that the virtual one doesn't is that it is great to show uh, concave shapes. Okay, so this is a concave quadrilateral, and you can see that the vertices, okay, so this vertex here, okay, you see this is has an acute angle and this goes around. Okay, the rubber band goes around the peg. Now here again another acute angle and the rubber band goes around the peg. So both these pegs, okay, so this one and this one, they're both inside. Same thing is with this one, right? So this one also you can see that it is a obtuse, probably obtuse angle, maybe right angle, but again you can see it is inside. Now in contrast, if you look at this peg, okay, you see obviously this is a reflex angle. Okay, so this is definitely a reflex angle, and you can see that the peg is actually, I mean, the rubber band goes around it, so it's the peg is outside, right? Now this is something that I don't think is possible probably to program in the virtual one. Okay, so I'll show you in the virtual, but let me just get done with it. The other thing is, if I put another rubber band exactly on top of the green one, okay, you still can actually see that there are two of them, etc. Okay, and if I release it, you can see that uh, they don't match, right? So there is this vertex which is not touched by the red one, which kind of envelopes the whole thing. Okay, and so this one is kind of special in many ways, right? It has the corresponding internal angle as the reflex angle, right? And it is uh, outside the rubber band. It is not on the envelope. Okay, so there are many things which make it quite special. Okay, and these things all come together very nicely in the physical geoboard. Some of it comes in the virtual also, but not so clearly. I mean, the kind of association that a physical geoboard brings in this way is quite important. Okay, this kind of associations kind of helps one connect the dots, so to speak. Okay, so let's do the same thing Now in the virtual one, okay, so let me make a okay, so see, I can change the color very quickly. So if I select this one and I click here, then I have changed the color. So I'm just going to make a, yeah, so there. Okay, see, here this is kind of in the line, right? In the physical one, it would have really come in the way. But here the advantage is that uh, in the virtual one it really doesn't matter. Okay, now if we put another one around it, okay, along the same thing, okay, see, if you put it like this, you won't even know the green one was there, right? It's completely hidden, there is no way to figure out. But as you release one vertex, then you can see it becoming visible. Okay, so uh, this is, I mean, this is how it will look in the uh, virtual geoboard. And so you can see that, I mean, the rubber band, the virtual rubber band goes exactly through the peg, so there's no distinction between this one or this one or this one, they're all kind of the same. So that association which was there in the physical geoboard is kind of lost in the virtual one. Okay, so um, I just wanted to share that. Okay. Now, what are the things that you can do? Um, I think because on a geoboard we use rubber bands, so it's a good idea to get children to draw different triangles and so on. So, I mean, the PPT is just to show you some pictures, and so here are some more pictures. Okay. Yeah. So okay, so here you can see that there are about 8 triangles, 7 triangles actually. The equilateral triangle is missing and it cannot be drawn on this dot sheet. And there are several ways to prove it. And I believe there has been one article at least mentioning that proof. Um, However, on the circular side, you can draw an equilateral triangle. Okay, now what is important is, now if you look at this, see, the yellow ones are obviously obtuse, the orange ones are um, right triangles, and the red ones are acute. And also you can see that there are so these are scalene triangles, this one, and these are scalene. Whereas this one is isosceles, this is isosceles, and these two are also isosceles. Okay. So you can basically get children to draw different possible triangles, and then you can ask, you know uh, to justify various things. See, for example, if they claim, see, in case of right isosceles, you can see that it is 2 units, this is 2 units, so they are equal. Now, in this case, if you want to say that obviously these two sides are equal and therefore isosceles, you actually have to kind of invoke kind of line symmetry here. Okay, same here and same here. Okay, now if the right isosceles was drawn in this way, then again, yes, you could have invoked um, the line symmetry, or there were maybe another way to look into it. Okay, so it's not, I mean, it's a good idea not to stop just at asking children to draw different triangles, but kind of argue out uh, why something is um, a right angle, or why something is some sides are equal, and these kind of things. Okay, and so I mean, so obviously that kind of leads us to, so what are the assumptions? So when you have a dot sheet or a geoboard like this, obviously the pegs or the dots are in a rectangular array, right? And they're equidistant horizontally and vertically from each other. And and these angles are all right angles. So these are the assumptions which we can use, and based on that we can conclude various things, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's a good idea to kind of um, get them to start providing argument on as to what is this and what is that, and so on and so forth. Now, in the article where Geoboard was reviewed, there is also a worksheet, and if you look at the worksheet, you will find several activities there. So, for example, one of them was, so if you have the same base and you kind of vary the and you draw different isosceles triangles, right? So here are a couple of pictures, okay, of isosceles triangles. And now let us discuss what is hidden there more, right? So if you look at this one, okay, so see, the base is fixed, the height is varying, and the base angles are also varying. In fact, what is happening is, as the height is increasing, the base angle is also increasing, right? So one natural question would be, so if we want to go for a right isosceles, then what is going to be the height? And this is something that it might pop into you automatically if you stare at the grid for a long time. So you see, if you draw this line, right, so you can see that there are two right isosceles triangles forming, and then you kind of know that, okay, so it is right angle here, so 45 45, another 45 45, so here you get a right angle. Okay, I mean, there are different ways to argue about it, right? I mean, another way it would be to think of it, if you join this kind of, flip it down, then you kind of get a tilted square, right? So different ways to think about it, but basically this is a very important thing, that when the height is half of the base, then the then you get a right isosceles. Okay, and so what do you need to do if you want an obtuse isosceles? What do you need to do if you want an acute isosceles? What do you need to do? Okay, so these are things, then it becomes much more automatic to you, and you don't have to think too hard on it. Again, I mean, whatever I'm saying is not rocket science, is basic spatial sense, but unless the opportunity is given to explore this, to draw this without much guidance, with just the grid to guide you, these senses don't naturally develop in everybody, but given the opportunity, they do. Okay, but the important thing is, it doesn't just stop there. Where else does it go? Does it have any link to trigonometry? I mean, you can, if you have it, right, it's enough to focus just on one part. Okay, and then we are basically focusing on right triangles instead of isosceles triangles. Like half of isosceles is always a right triangle, right? So then, I mean, immediately you can kind of see that, okay, so the base is fixed, okay, the height varies, and the angle changes. So I mean, doesn't it give you a sense of what happens to tan theta as uh, theta increases? Okay. And I mean, this is just one of the things, right? You can potentially fix the height and vary the base, and do a similar exercise and see what happens. And that will probably tell you about cos, or even um, cot, and things like that, right? So these are kind of things that um, you can start this. Okay, or even when you go and teach trigonometry, these kind of senses that we usually don't look into this variation. What happens if we fix one parameter and vary the rest? Okay, but these are things, I mean, with dynamic geometry software like GeoGebra, or there are some others, this comes out very nicely, right? But this can be initiated even with a geoboard or with a dot sheet. Okay, so the key idea is you generate certain pictures. Okay, I mean, obviously children who look at it, the first thing they will say is Christmas tree, but then you can kind of try to get to the mathematics that is hidden in the Christmas tree. And of course you can make your own Christmas tree with isosceles triangles also, and that can be a fun project too. Okay, um, now if we do it on the circle, now here you can get the green one is a isosceles, but not just isosceles, it's an equilateral. The question is, how do you argue that it is equilateral? Okay, and one of the things can be to kind of rotate it and see that there are exactly three pegs. Okay, outside, I mean, each. So that way you can kind of try to establish that they are all of equal length. Okay. Now in this case, obviously the circumradii are, that's fixed, right? It's the same circle. The chord or the base, that varies, and along with that height varies, height of the triangle and the base angles. Okay. Now can these be linked to angle subtended at the center and at the circumference? Okay, so you see what is happening to this angle. Okay, so this is uh, an acute angle and less than 180 degree for sure. This is also acute. This one is, you can actually calculate it. I mean, I think this is a 60 degree and this is 120 degree. I mean, obviously these can be measured, and this is also acute. Okay, now this is the interesting case where you have the diameter and you get a right angle, and then you see here you have a reflex angle and you get an obtuse. So one of the things that happens is that for the acute triangles, the center of the circle was inside the triangle. Okay, so if we consider this acute triangle, the center is inside. If we consider the equilateral, it is inside. If we consider right isosceles, then it is on the hypotenuse, and for an obtuse triangle, obtuse isosceles in this case, it is outside. Okay, now this, I mean, often the textbooks don't include all the pictures, so and a construction might lead to this, and sometimes students find it very, they think that they have done something wrong, that the center is the circumcenter is outside, but actually they have just done everything right. It is supposed to be outside, because if you want an obtuse angle here, then you need the double of it is going to be reflex, and therefore it can't be, the center can't be inside the circle, it has to come out, right? So here are three pictures. The first one is obtuse triangles in a circle. The second one is right triangles in a circle. And the third one is acute triangles. So the activity that you can give students is maybe you can split them into three groups and ask them to make these kind of triangles and then see what do they observe. Okay. So for a right triangle, you need a semicircle, right? For an obtuse one, it doesn't take up, it is all inside a minor segment. Okay. And for an acute, it requires the major segment. Okay. So these are kind of sense that if it is built in early on, then later on they should be able to connect many dots. Okay. So as far as pictures are concerned, I think that's all the pictures I had to show. Um, however, uh, when it comes to quadrilaterals, life does get much more complicated. Okay. I mean, there are only 8 type of triangles if you consider all possibilities. But when it comes to quadrilaterals, it definitely exceeds 100 if you look at all possible side combinations and all possible um, angle combinations. Okay. So in case of quadrilaterals, it's a good idea to kind of introduce various quadrilaterals and then let students explore and try to draw them and so on and so forth. Okay. And in the in the worksheet that accompanied this article, there were several such suggestions on what kind of questions you can ask. So, for example, I have already shared with you the question on squares and rectangles. So, one of the things that you can do, and let me share screen again. So one of the things that you can do is you can draw a rectangle, any rectangle. So let me draw a tilted one. Okay, so this may be too small, so let me use the bigger one. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So this looks like a reasonable rectangle. So what happens if you just release it one corner, one vertex? What kind of triangle do you get? Okay. So obviously you get the diagonal, whatever comes with the diagonal and the rest, right? And you can, of course, another advantage of this is that you can show a diagonal very nicely. It will just appear as a line segment and not as a pair of line segment, which will happen here. So you can see what happens when you just release this. Okay. And what happens if it was a square instead? Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So what this kind of does is kind of connects um, the how triangles are linked to quadrilaterals and things like that. Okay. Now the other kind of questions you ask is, what about a trapezium? I mean, can you draw a trapezium with, let's say, a right angle, okay, and an acute angle? Okay, so this is one possibility. Now, now you automatically notice that if that happens, a trapezium cannot have just one right angle. It will have to have two. And if it has an acute angle, then it will have to have an obtuse angle. Okay. So before getting into proofs, before getting into many properties and stuff, if these kind of observations come first, then the proofs and why it happens, these all make a lot more sense. Okay. Now, there is one trapezium which I believe, so this trapezium is not so unfamiliar. And of course, we all have seen trapeziums which kind of look like this. Oops. Right? So these are known, but the one trapezium which is not so common is a trapezium which has two acute angles, but they are opposite to each other. Okay. Now this is very much a trapezium, but it is not represented as such. Okay. And so, I mean, this is something that, that often misses the imagination of what a trapezium can look like. Okay. So one of the questions is that, what happens if the legs, okay, if these two sides are equal, the sides which, uh, you know, then it becomes an isosceles trapezium in this case. Now, in case of this trapezium where the acute angles are opposite to each other, if the legs are equal, then what kind of a trapezium does it pick up? I mean, what kind of a quadrilateral does it pick up? Okay. And usually, in most cases, if you stretch a trapezium, okay, usually, okay, so let me first make the trapezium, okay. Now, if I stretch it out, I mean, usually they will kind of meet at a certain point, okay. I mean, same thing can happen here also. Okay. Okay. So, so you can see that they are forming kind of uh, triangles, and you can think of a trapezium as a triangle minus a triangle. Okay. Now this usually works for most trapezium except for one. So I would leave you to think which one. Okay. Um, so similarly, you can, another misconception which is there, and sometimes among teachers also, see the whenever we draw a kite, usually, I'll draw the halving diagonal in white. So this is usually longer than the other diagonal, which I will draw in blue. Okay. But is this always the case? Okay. I mean, what if a trapezium has two, a kite has two, uh, two obtuse angles, two unequal obtuse angles, right? So then it will probably look something like this. And then you can clearly see um, which diagonal is longer. Okay. So sometimes when we introduce shapes, I mean, textbooks can't provide all the pictures, right? And so it is quite important that students get a chance to play with different possible varieties. Okay. I mean, there is a definition given, you cannot break that, but within that definition, what are the different possibilities? Okay, and that is where, when we have to play around with it, that is where it is very, very helpful to have something like Geoboard, real or virtual, where you can generate pictures quickly. Okay, and once you have got the hang of it, then obviously record that in dot sheets as well. Okay, and then maybe hopefully you can just use the dot sheets. Okay, so these kind of things, then what happens when, if you allow this kind of play, then many misconceptions don't fall, and you have a richer exposure to the concepts that are being taught. Okay, so however, I should mention that uh, there are many more things you can do with dot sheets that you obviously can't do with GeoGebra. Lot of patterns making, tiling activities, and stuff. And also, in a virtual geoboard, you can probably talk about angles. You can make angles easily like this. Okay, so this is more doable probably in the virtual geoboard than in the regular one, and then you can vary the angle. Okay, so this kind of thing is possible, but dot sheets also lend themselves very easily. And if you have, they have got some idea, some results, then you should absolutely ask them to argue out um, on what kind of angle they are making, why it is this and why it is that. So a good starting point can be, what kind of angles can you make on a dot sheet like this? And see, for example, if you make this angle, I mean, it's an acute angle. Can you tell more? I mean, you can also say that it is less than 45 degree, because you see this angle would be, okay, let me make it with, yeah. So if you look at the yellow one, that is a 45-degree exact, and you can argue why it is 45, because this angle has been halved, right? This right angle. And this, so the white angle is, this is actually less than 45. So these kind of argument, I mean, these are not full proofs, but kind of builds towards logical argument and stuff. So these can be initiated by the use of either dot sheet or geoboard, and they can help in terms of fostering this, you know, providing logic or justifying what they're thinking, what they're saying. Those kind of things can be done. Okay, so those are mainly the thoughts that I had. And so we are usually open for questions so far. And so this is a good time to ask any question, or if you want to share your own experiences in terms of use of Geoboard, so that also you can do. So this is a good time to do all of that. So let me pause for a bit and see if you have any questions. Okay. So So let me share the worksheet, and meanwhile, and we have done some of it, but maybe I can share the whole worksheet. And uh, yeah, so this is the worksheet. Okay, so the first question, in terms of making square and releasing one corner to get triangle, that we have already discussed, and same thing you can do with rectangle. Okay, then you have also seen the isosceles triangles with base fixed. Okay, now um, about this equilateral triangle on rectangular geoboard, like that cannot be done. Similarly, there is one triangle which cannot be done on drawn on the isometric dot sheet, and that it cannot be drawn can be proved also, and we have published that proof some in at right angles, and but it's a much more complicated proof. In case for equilateral triangle on rectangular dot sheet, there are actually multiple proofs. Okay, some quite simple, some involving trigonometry. So you have a whole array of range of things. Whereas when we talk about the isometric dot sheets and the mysterious triangle that can't be drawn on it, so far there is only one proof. Okay, not many. Okay, now so in the equilateral in the circular geoboard, you can make equilateral. You can get again a series of isosceles triangles, and we have discussed some of the observations, etc., and all of that. So then in case of rectangular, we are back to rectangular geoboard. Again, you can look into squares and rectangles which are tilted by angles other than 45 degree in particular. And then there are a series of things about trapeziums, and then I think kite. Okay, so so again, I believe that we have discussed most of these. Okay, so these are things for which one should try. These are not very difficult, but it doesn't obviously include much computation all, but it kind of stretches your imagination on what are the possibilities. Okay, and that is something that is often missing. Okay, and who knows, maybe these will help um, students who shy away from computation, uh, you know maybe enjoy it, math a bit more. Okay, so now, so there are a series of questions on kites, and we have discussed having diagonal whose equal angles are right angles. Um, so that's a very special kite, and you can kind of argue out why it is special, um, and what kind of angles equal ones. Okay, yeah. So these are some of the things that can be done. Um, Also, so let me stop sharing. Also, in this circular one, before going into, when you are discussing quadrilaterals in particular, um, see, that is the thing, that in case of triangles, all triangles have a circumcircle, and all of the triangles have an incircle. Okay, so there is nothing fancy about it. But when it comes to quadrilaterals, not all quadrilaterals are cyclic, and not all of them have an in circle, meaning they are tangential. Okay, and in fact, you can have one or the other. A rhombus, for example, is tangential. You can put an in circle inside it. A rectangle, on the other hand, is cyclic. And generally, unless rhombus is a square, it will not be cyclic, and a rectangle will not be tangential unless, again, it's a square, right? So things get very interesting when it goes to quadrilateral. Lot of changes happen, okay, and these they can be explored through Geoboard. So one of the things that can be done here is, what are the quadrilaterals that you can make on let's say the outer circle or just the inner circle. Okay, so if all 4 points have to be on one particular circle, then which quadrilaterals can be made and which are the ones which cannot be made. Okay, now if you allow some points to be on the outer and some to be on the inner, then what are the possibilities? So these are the various things that one can explore. And again, the basic idea is to explore, have fun, and check what are the possibilities. Okay, so looks like we have a question. uh, yeah, so yes, Gauri, it is very important that to take it that to the next step of getting them to justify. uh, okay. Okay, so you have got a very ambitious plan of good ambitious plan of coming up with a manual. So definitely, I hope the worksheet we shared will help towards that. And yes, especially with the virtual geoboard being there, you can set up a self-learning environment. Okay, so yes. Yes, I think this is something that would be really great if you can have questions which they will have to do and explore and all of that. I don't see any pitfall as such, but whenever you are learning, it really helps if you ever have any doubt, especially when it is kind of exploration like this, if there is somebody you can check with. Okay, so the learner can work on these things on their own, but if they can consult somebody that you know can you see if this is correct or not, or I'm not sure, I'm sure that these are correct, but this one I'm not 100% sure, if they can consult somebody, that would be good. Okay, and again, I don't think, I'm not sure if it is possible to come up with a manual in one go. So you, as you do it, you see the responses, and yeah, so it will be good if you can see the learners responses. Maybe not make any comment unless the learner is asking for it, but at least you can see what they have done, right? So that will give you some sense of what are pitfalls that you want to avoid, right? For example, that the halving diagonal of a kite is always the longer diagonal actually came from a teacher, and I was a bit surprised. um, so uh, so so that's something that you may, you have to see. Okay, so thank you for your question. And I wish you all the best for to come up with a manual like this. And we would really appreciate if you want to share it with us. And I think we will be very happy to publish it even at right angles. So do write to us. And as mentioned, In the at the end of the worksheet. Uh, so if you try out these things and you have, we would love to get your pictures. So do send us the pictures that you make, the triangles and quadrilaterals that you made. They may be very different from what we have. So any other question, comment? So yeah, the key idea is basically explore, then be a why teacher and ask, okay, why do you say these two are equal? Okay, why do you say this is more than that? So keep asking a lot of probing question, which should sharpen their analytical abilities, reasoning skills. Okay, so don't just stop once they have made a picture. Let them argue it out, let them justify it, and that is how they will be mathematizing, and you will shape their minds to mathematize. Okay, so unless there are any other question or comment, we would like to end today's webinar here. We will then see you again next month, third Wednesday, as usual. So thank you for joining us today.